Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Imagine you're scrolling through social media and you come across a video like this.
I had to save my son from psychosis and the system that was supposed to help him.
Would you stop and watch the rest of the video? I did, and on my next guest of Beyond Survival, this mom is going to be my special guest, and we're going to find out what happened.
Would you stop and watch? I did, and today we're going to find out what happened. Welcome to Beyond Survival on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. My special guest today is MEHWISH Khan, who is living a normal life with her family until something strange started happening to her son in 2020. In 2020, MEHWISH's son, Issa, was 10 years old and his behavior started changing. He became full of anxiety and phobias and told his mother, "I feel confused." So during an MRI where her son was given gadolinium contrast dye, he came out of the machine in a full-blown psychosis. And this is where the story begins and their hospital journey starts. After being diagnosed with functional neurological disorder, FND, PANS, autoimmune encephalitis, and a host of other medical and psychological ailments, Issa became a frequent flyer in the medical system by January 2021. Like most people who are frequent flyers in the medical system, MEHWISH experienced gaslighting, misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis, and doctors who insisted that her 10-year-old son's illness was all in his head. At one point, MEHWISH was even falsely accused of child abuse, and Child Protective Services was called. Through a lot of unnecessary struggle, MEHWISH found the correct diagnosis and has made sure that her son receives the correct treatment for the last 6 years. And in 2025, her son Issa finally returned back to school. MEHWISH is here to talk about her experience and share the lessons she learned with other people and parents who are trying to navigate the medical system. Additionally, she is also in the process of writing a book about this situation called In the Hands of Doubt, Surviving Psychosis in the System. So today we're going to hear MEHWISH's full story and learn tips and tricks to help save a loved one, like a child, from the medical system and get them the treatment they need. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome MEHWISH to the show.
Hi, TALIA.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
So to kick off the show, now that I've given a background of your son's medical journey and so many misdiagnoses and gaslighting, how did you ultimately come to Issa's accurate diagnosis and treatment? I think that's the best way to start.
Yeah, so I think that I had a different perspective than the doctors, which I naturally would as a mom, right? So once we made it to the hospital, because Issa was no longer speaking, or he wasn't walking and he was getting confused. The doctors were running a bunch of tests and they couldn't figure out like what could be wrong with him, because according to them, all of his MRIs, EEGs, everything was inconclusive. So their conclusion was this is something called functional neurological disorder. Now, I don't want to dismiss people that have FND because whatever they're going through is real. And I have a lot of respect for the doctor that helped us actually tell Isa, no, it is not FND at one point. But for like the months leading up to Isa's big hospital stay, I was noticing these like curious kind of like connections. I would notice that he would have tics, vocal tics, and a lot of anxiety. And the strange thing is that when I would give him antihistamines, those tics and anxiety would decrease. He would get nausea and say he couldn't eat or his food was getting stuck in his throat. But when he had antihistamines or anti-inflammatories, that would get better too. So in my mind, I already had an idea that something immunological is happening. There's something going on with his uh, system of his body that controls allergies and inflammation that was also affecting the way that his brain was working. So the anxiety and the tics didn't come out of nowhere. When I was told in the hospital, oh, he has functional neurological disorder, is he a kid that's really stressed out at school? Does he take on a lot of pressure? At first, I was like, well, I mean, it's possible, he's a high achieving kid. But when I saw that none of those symptoms were lining up to what I had seen for the months leading up to that hospitalization, I was like, this can't be right. There has to be something biological happening.
You're the mom. You know your son better than the doctors do, right? They think they're doctors and they know, but when something is different with your son. So
well, that was kind of my thing too, is the doctor, even the best intending doctor, can only see your child for 15, maybe 20 minutes, or if they're private pay, maybe an hour, right? So the months leading up to his illness where I'm watching, why is he wetting the bed? He's never done that before. Why is he afraid of bees? He loves being outside. Why is he terrified of walking on a sidewalk if there's ants? Why is he afraid to pick out a movie for movie night, right? Like he wants to watch something familiar because he's afraid of a new show. And I'm like, none of this is making sense. But when you take your child to the hospital, the doctor takes a look and goes, well, here are a few symptoms that I can associate with an illness that I've already got in my mind that I know of. And so that's where I think it's so important. I'm not the first mom to say this. It is so important for doctors to listen, especially to moms. Parents, yes, but especially to moms. We're tuned into things that they could not have access to.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you became such an advocate for your son and wouldn't give up and learned everything that you could, the way that you would expect anybody to, not just a mother, anybody going through something like this. And somehow that ended up backfiring. Like you told me your story, like I couldn't believe it. You had told me that at one point you were at a crossroads and you were wondering, is your kid going to die or are you going to jail? Which is absolutely crazy to me. So can you tell us what it was like being accused of medical child abuse and what that meant for Isa's healthcare going forward?
Yeah, the idea of me going to prison actually came up twice in this awful journey. The first time I even made a comment like that was when I found Isa on the floor babbling. And by that time, I had already done months of research and I knew that he needed something called IVIG. It is the donor plasma of 20,000 healthy individuals. And that I knew that was what he needed to kind of put out the fire in his brain and in his body. And I scooped him up off the ground and I told my husband, this is it. I'm either getting him IVIG or I'm going to jail today. You're going to have to come get me out of jail. So that was the first time I was ready to, I was like, I'm going to have to make some noise. I'll do whatever it takes to save my kid. Thankfully, that day, he did get the IVIG. I met the neuroimmunologist that she is a champion, like she is our hero. But I told her, hey, this is what he needs. And if it is autoimmune encephalitis, or if it looks like autoimmune encephalitis, can you please treat it like it is? I even went in with what was the exact like the dosage, right? I was like, he needs 2 grams per kilogram of IVIG administered over 2 days. Like that is what is needed for an autoimmune type of illness. Now, this doctor was curious and courageous enough, and she trusted me. I'm not saying you have to do what I'm saying, but she listened and was like, okay, let's try this because it does make sense. The dots connect. So that was the first time I was ready to go to jail for him. The next time that it happened was not my call. Like it wasn't my decision. So I had found Isa had come back from his second round of IVIG. The doctor had the doctor that we had met the first time, she said, you know what, if he declines again, you can bring him back to the hospital. I will admit him and administer the next dose of IVIG. And so we finally felt like we had a path to healing. He was far from okay, but there was like this glimmer of hope that he was starting to return. After the first dose of IVIG, he started to come back. I mean, he was speaking again within 48 hours. And so that precedent was there that, okay, we're moving towards something that's working. And so the next time he declined, he was hallucinating. He thought he could fly. He chipped his tooth. I called the doctor. I said, you know, he's declining rapidly. What do I do? The nurse said, look, the doctor has called in his prescription, or the doctor has authorized his IVIG. Just bring him to the hospital. We will admit him. So that happened, but then I encountered the doctor that was on call that day. So it's important for parents to understand, even if you have a really good relationship with a physician that has given you a diagnosis and believes what's happening and is authorizing medical care, there could be another physician at that same hospital who says, nope, I disagree. Anyway, we leave the, we had a really odd exchange with that doctor. I was naive. I didn't know what was happening when it was happening. So he's talking to Isa, and he's like, you know, what's this puppy? What's his name? And Isa's not speaking again, right? His condition has declined. So I speak for him. I said, oh, you know, it's his puppy. He's really attached to his stuffed animals. And this doctor says to me, Mom, are you a cardiologist? And that question caught me off guard. I was like very confused because what does that even mean? But I was like, no, I work in marketing. And he goes, oh, well, I thought you were a cardiologist, maybe. There was like this smugness to his tone that I didn't really understand, but I was like, okay, maybe he's just kind of an odd person. He comes up to me after examining Isa for like less than 5 minutes, and he says, Mom, how do you think your child is going to behave if you continue rewarding him with like stuffed animals? And now I'm starting to pick up on his vibe. I'm like, I'm not, what do you mean by that? I don't say anything. And then he follows it up with, you know, he's a really smart kid. And that's when I realize what he's insinuating. He is suggesting that I am bribing Isa to put on a performance because I want attention. Munchausen by proxy. Anyway, so I responded, I'm like, well, you know, he's smart. He's not psychic. And I think that that's when it was clear to both of us that it was over. And the doctor said, well, I think we're done here. And he leaves. When I got home, I discovered that the lot of IVIG that there had been a lot of IVIG recalled. And so I'm looking through his notes because we had just had IVIG. I was like, oh no, I hope that's not what Isa got. So I'm looking through his notes going, can I identify a lot number? And that is when I found the note about medical child abuse, and that mom had, quote unquote, produced a video, a narrative of her child's illness, and that medical child abuse should not be ignored. Actually, at first it said medical neglect. Later on, the next day, it was updated to abuse. When I discovered that, I told my husband, and I was offended. I was like, who the hell does this guy think he is? I wrote this email or this message to our doctor's office, and I was like, what the hell is going on? I want this removed. Like, who does he think he is? My husband got in touch with a medical child abuse attorney that same day, thankfully. And she's like, I want to get on a call. This is very serious. And she helped us realize just how serious it was. She said, the fact that they changed the word neglect to abuse means the doctor has spoken to Child Protective Services and they are helping him make a case against you. You cannot go back to that hospital if you want to keep your child safe.
The one thing I wanted to ask here is, I don't know if you feel comfortable. If you don't, it's fine, is to just briefly talk about the advice they gave you to handle the situation going forward, the attorneys.
Yeah, so the advice was really an eye-opener for me, because when you imagine a mom, right? You imagine like this mama bear who will fight the world. She's going to fight for her kids and she's going to do whatever it takes. And that's exactly who I always was, right? Like, my kids are my world. To my surprise, because I was new to this, the medical child abuse attorney says to me in no unclear terms, MEHWISH, you need to shut up. And, I'm still defending myself. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I quit my job. He can no longer go to school. Like, our lives are completely revolving around this illness. Like, everything is ruined. And who would want this? And she said, every single thing that you just said to me, they will use against you to make a case for why you have choreographed this world where where your child is so sick that you've made it your entire story. That's how Munchausen by proxy works. Now it's called fictitious disorder. But so everything that I was saying in my defense would be used against me to say, see, this woman is mentally ill and she wants her entire life to be around how sick her child is. And then when I brought up the fact that, well, my husband went through a similar situation in 2012, like, this is clearly genetic. And there was this like really heavy silent pause. And she goes, and what do they all have in common? And the answer was me. So the implication was that I was behind making my husband and my son sick.
That's just crazy. But didn't they also tell you to like not speak, let your husband speak for you? They just like silence you and you're trying to save your son, and it's now you're in this position where it's like, I want to save him and tell you what I learned and try to help and be his advocate, but everything I say is going to be used against me. Like, how am I supposed to do this?
So yeah, that's like, as I was writing my memoir too, like, that's kind of the central theme, is like the healthcare system is defaulting to psychiatric, explanations and even accusations of medical child abuse. So now here I am in this impossible position of like mother, detective, and also defendant, because they could just as well accuse me of wrongdoing, and I wouldn't be the first parent to be imprisoned for medical child abuse. That never happened.
Yeah, one of your quotes, you say, I don't know if it's in your book or on your website or something, it says, or maybe on one of your videos, it says, if the answer is not in their heads, they'll say it's in yours. And let me tell you, that just gave me goosebumps when I read that, because all of us out here that are suffering from chronic illness or complicated issues, this has happened to every single one of us. And it's extremely dangerous, not just for you, the mom, but for the patient who's not going to get the treatment they need because it's psychological when it isn't. You know what I mean? I don't think they understand like how harmful that diagnosis is. And then every time you go in and you bring your son, or a chronically ill person comes in, they see the records, psych patient, and you're immediately written off, but you have this thing underlying that's not getting not getting treated. It's extremely harmful to make that kind of diagnosis.
Well, that's why I really make this point that, this diagnosis for just having a diagnosis or because you need a billing code or something that, that is not benign. It's not just a placeholder. Every single physician or clinician that comes across your medical records is going to skim through everything that's been written before, and they are going to judge you based off of that. So, I mean, for example, there's a few ways I've seen this happen in my own life, right? Isa was diagnosed with autism when he was 9. This was a year before his, big kind of critical onset. So now we have questions if he ever really was. But when he was not recognizing me. He was asking me if he loves me. He was just kind of looking at me curiously. He was detached and confused. And me as a mom, I'm in tears, right? Like my child, just 3 days ago, I brought him into the hospital and now he doesn't know who I am. So my eyes are red, they're welled up. And the doctor who had been taking care of Isa for 3 days in that hospital so far, she looks at me. Well, the first thing was she says to me, "Oh, I didn't realize he was verbal." She, for 3 critical days, observed my child's declining psychiatric state and assumed that because autism was listed on his medical records, that he was nonverbal. She didn't realize that over his stay, he had gone from not walking and being a little confused to no longer speaking. Well, before she left the room that day, she stopped at the door. She turns and looks back at me and she says, "Mom, have you considered doing anything about your anxiety?" And that just really floored me. At the moment, I didn't even know to be offended. I genuinely took it as like, oh, she's concerned about me. But in retrospect, I see how that moment, Isa and I were both marked with a scarlet letter. A for autism, A for anxiety. He was never nonverbal. He was always articulate and vibrant and brilliant. And I've never had anxiety, and no one's ever questioned if I have anxiety. But it's interesting because I've heard you can go into the hospital without a mental condition or a mental disorder, but you'll probably come out with one. And in that moment, she labeled me as having anxiety because my guess is I was inconvenient. Oh, sorry, Talia, I can't. You're muted. There you go.
So everything that you've been talking about and you've gone through and that you've learned, what advice can you give people in general or parents that have complicated cases and are trying to navigate the medical system? Like, what advice can you give them that maybe they won't get a psychological diagnosis? Like, you know what I mean? Like tips and tricks.
I mean, I wish I had the answer, but what I can tell you is that I've learned a lot. The first thing is that everything that you are saying is going into your medical records. So where you are offering, at least I can speak for myself, I was oversharing. I was sharing all sorts of data points because to me, every single data point could potentially, may not be, but could potentially help lead them to a diagnosis. What that was interpreted as was mom has anxiety, she's catastrophizing. So it's really important to understand how the medical system works. A doctor that is seeing you for 15 minutes does not know what to do with all of that information, right? And so if you are not composed, if you are not well dressed, there's so many studies, and it's unfortunate, but the reality is, if you go in poised and well dressed, they will assume that you are well educated and have the funds to sue them if something goes wrong. I've seen a lot of that, and it's unfortunate, but it's true. Taking someone with you, especially a man. I hate saying this so much, but the truth is that women are often accused of Munchausen by proxy. They're dismissed as having anxiety. And frankly, I believe that what a lot of doctors today call anxiety is the equivalent of hysteria. So the way that we look at hysteria in retrospect and go, that was so unfair, it was uncalled for. I believe they do the same thing today with women and anxiety. So I would say take an ally. If it can be a man, any man, even that will increase your odds of being taken seriously. And the other thing is find your tribe. There's this quote in Madeleine L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time, and it goes, you don't have to understand things for them to be, right? So the medical profession is based, medical students learn a breadth of information, a lot of information, but they don't have all of the information. Neither do they have the mental capacity to know all things at all times. I have ADHD. I connect dots in ways that I find surprising that other people don't connect those dots, right? If we can work together, that would be really, really great. If we can understand that and have respect for the medical profession that has a wealth of knowledge, but that medical profession also needs to have appreciation for the deep knowledge and understanding that people have of themselves and their loved ones. So we really need to work together on that front. And also, if you go to a provider that does not listen to you and dismisses you, you need to find another one. You need to find someone who respects you. And it's kind of a catch-22 because looking for a provider that understands you and your condition and respects you can also be labeled doctor shopping, which is another red flag, right? That, oh, you're just looking for anybody that will agree with you. And that's not what it is. It's just looking for someone who respects you and listens to you, like our neurologist finally did. We had run through so many neurologists before one neurologist quietly listened and said, let's give IVIG a try. So yeah, that's the best advice that I can give is like, find your tribe. You will find resources, Facebook groups, Reddit threads. I caution you, be careful because anybody and everybody will be in those forums. So you have to use your own discernment, but you will find really valuable nuggets of information. Like, for example, getting floxed is not a topic of conversation that you're going to come across in a random community, but you will find really vital information in those threads and forums.
Right, right. So what do you want viewers to know about neuroinflammation, right? Because that's Issa's actual diagnosis. And if you could afterwards just explain a little, like, what is the IVIG that he gets for that? Like, people may not understand what that is, but I know people also don't understand what neuroinflammation is.
Yeah, so I mean, his official diagnosis is seronegative autoimmune encephalitis. What seronegative means is the evidence all tells you that yes, this disease exists, the presentation says that the disease exists, although we cannot prove it, right? So there's no diagnostic testing that has these kind of alarms that go, oh yes, this is the biomarker that is causing this illness. But everything in Issa's presentation says this is autoimmune encephalitis. What neural inflammation, brain inflammation, inflammatory conditions of the brain, seronegative autoimmune encephalitis, even PANS and PANDAS. So that's pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome. And if it's PANDAS, it's associated with strep. All of these cluster of diagnoses are essentially saying the brain is inflamed in a subclinical way. That means the MRI might look normal. The EEG might look normal. The blood tests might look normal, but that doesn't mean that the illness does not exist. You must treat it as though it is autoimmune encephalitis, because the cost of not doing that is their life. I had a brief conversation with a physician who said, Well, that's just not how medicine works, right? We start with the most probable, which is a mental health disorder, right? Bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety, and we work our way up. And my rebuttal to that was, what's more probable does not mean, it does not cover what is possible, right? So if my child has autoimmune encephalitis, he's no longer walking, no longer talking, has lost his ability to write and communicate, cannot control his bladder, has gone into psychosis, I need you to treat the thing that could kill him and not dilly-dally over here with he has stress from schoolwork, right? So anyway, the IVIG, it's intravenous immunoglobulin. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mom whose hyperfixation is making her kids well. So IVIG is used for two reasons, as far as I know. At a standard dose, it's used to treat people who are immunosuppressed, which means people who do not produce enough of their immune system to fight off bacteria or viruses. And then there are autoimmune conditions like lupus, like Guillain-Barré, like autoimmune encephalitis, where the body's own immune system is attacking itself, Crohn's disease, things like that. IVIG, because like I said before, is the donor plasma from thousands of healthy individuals. At a high dose, that IVIG will suppress the angry immune system of the person with an autoimmune illness. And it'll suppress it enough to where it will bring down inflammation. In Issa's case, he's hypermobile. He had POTS. And of course, autoimmune encephalitis. Consistent IVIG over 5 years resulted in his dilated aorta, which, by the way, is a ticking time bomb. It could rupture at any time. From the age of 10 to 16, his aorta has shrunk back down to within normal range. And his cardiologist says that the only thing that she can attribute this to is consistent IVIG, because he had systemic inflammation that has been basically put out because of this medication. So that's how IVIG works, and that's what Issa's diagnosis is. But that specific diagnosis is kind of an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of versions of brain inflammation.
Right. So this isn't a cure. This is a treatment to keep him alive. The inflammation increases, IVIG decreases it, and it's like this constant battle every month. There's one thing I wanted to hit on when you talked about medical testing, right? And I think the first thing people want to know is, like, what are the test results that show this? What are the positive tests? And if you don't have that, people don't believe that you have whatever illness it is. And I can speak from experience with me being floxed. There is no test that you can take, like a pregnancy test, that's like flox positive, flox negative. There's no such thing. So you have to make a clinical diagnosis based on symptoms and ruling everything out. So I just want to bring that up because I don't want people to believe that illnesses like that are less real just because the diagnostic testing is not available or is not good, right? So that's a huge misconception. It's like, show me the test that you're floxed. There's no such thing. Like you're saying with your son too, it's like we're doing the best we can to survive. And for everyone out there, there's like thousands of rare diseases and chronic illnesses that don't have diagnostic testing. There's too many illnesses and not enough like doctors and solutions and research. So that's why we're in the spot that we're in.
Well, it's such a good point. It's such an important point. And the more that I dig into this as I'm writing my memoir is, we live in a society in modern medicine that practices evidence-based medicine, which is wonderful. It's fantastic because you don't want clinicians just going willy-nilly treating you with anything and everything, right? But it's a double-edged sword. they are trained in medical school that if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And my question is, okay, cool. What about the zebras? What if you're a zebra? Does that mean that you are now invisible? And in my experience, it means yes, you are invisible in this current healthcare system, which is a travesty because the entire healthcare system is built on the understanding that we are in a constant state of learning and what we don't know before, right? Like germ theory, Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, when he introduced the idea that the reason why women giving birth in hospitals were dying at greater rates than the ones who were giving birth in homes through midwives was because he said these doctors are opening up cadavers that have all sorts of diseases and pathogens, and they are not sanitizing their hands before they go and deliver the babies and the placentas. So these women were getting infections and dying at alarming rates. And he was the laughing stock of the medical community at the time because it was unfathomable that these gentlemanly doctors were dirty, right? It wasn't for like 100 years later that it was discovered, okay, yeah, germs exist. And that's why these people are dying of infection. So like there needs to be, and this is kind of like the hill that I'm screaming on and will die on, is there needs to be humility in the practice of medicine because we do not know what we do not know. And I found that the only doctors that have helped us were the ones that were curious and humble and said, I don't know. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. And they're very far and few in between. So before we close the show, what is there that you would like to share? Anything about your book or any last minute tips or tricks? Any hope to the viewers? Anything? I'm just leaving it up to you for the last couple of minutes before I close.
Yeah. So yes, of course, I would love I'm currently in the process of writing In the Hands of Doubt, Surviving Psychosis and the System. And you can sign up for my book drop. But really the reason I got into this is not because I wanted to write a book or sell a book. The reason that I'm raising awareness is this because my children's lives depend on it. Your children's lives might depend on it as well. And we need to talk about invisible illnesses, the medical system being evidence-based at the cost of curiosity. And one thing I think, like if I can leave you with some hope, is a story from when Isa first got sick. So when Isa was first diagnosed with, he was first diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome because he was having vocal tics and physical tics. And Tourette's syndrome, as far as I knew, is basically a life sentence. There is no cure. You can manage it, but for the rest of your life, you are going to be battling involuntary sounds and movements. In a lot of ways, you're going to be a social outcast, and people are going to, you're going to be isolated to some degree. And it just broke my heart. I was devastated as a mom. My mom, she's not a well-educated woman. She says to me, no, he's going to be fine. You just watch. She's a very religious woman. She has a lot of faith. And she just kept telling me, nope, you just watch. He's going to get better. And I told her, Mom, that's not how Tourette's works. Once you have Tourette's, you're diagnosed with Tourette's, Tourette's does not go away. This is not a message about faith. This is a message about how science and life actually work. My mom was delusional, but she was right. I did not know that my child's Tourette's would go away. I did not know that the OCD that was a life sentence that he was diagnosed with would go away. I did not know that eosinophilic esophagitis that prevented him from eating his favorite foods or potentially eating at all one day would go away. The psychosis, the fact that I thought my family would never laugh again or do anything again. I really thought it was over. But the reason was because I didn't know what I did not know. And so when a doctor or medical provider gives you what you think is a life sentence, it might be, but it also might not be.
That's really, really good advice. Very good advice. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it. So I'll just close out the show by saying, First of all, I want to thank MEHWISH for being brave enough to share her story and advice with us today. Her story is another example of how our medical system is just broken. And it's not just the doctors we interact with, it's the entire system. Now, what does lay with the doctors is what MEHWISH said earlier. If the answer is not in their heads, they'll say it's in yours. Oftentimes, when a doctor doesn't understand a patient's symptoms or know what to do or simply doesn't believe them, their medical problem is diagnosed as a psychological issue. And as I said earlier in the show, this can significantly harm a patient from receiving a correct diagnosis and proper treatment. If you have learned anything from MEHWISH's story today, and if you are someone that is gaslit and made to believe it's all in your head when you know it's not, do not let them change the narrative. Stick to your beliefs, stand your ground, even if you have to see way too many doctors. As MEHWISH said, someone will eventually believe you. And as I always say, if you're a complicated patient or chronically ill, no one is coming to save you. You have to save yourself. And this is one way that you can do that. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next month.
What if many of the problems we associate with aging are not random? What if there are identifiable causes behind declining energy, chronic disease, and memory problems? We have been told that aging is simply something we must accept, that slowing down is normal, that growing older means growing weaker. But what if that's only part of the story? Why do some people remain active and engaged well into their later years? Why do others struggle with disease, fatigue, and declining health? What is happening beneath the surface? What processes drive aging? In Aging Sucks, researcher, educator, and author Red O'Loughlin explores what researchers have discovered about why we grow older. No medical degree required, no confusing jargon, just clear explanations of what researchers have discovered about the processes that influence aging. You cannot stop aging, but understanding its causes may help you make better decisions about your health, your future, and your quality of life. Because understanding comes before action. Action creates hope. Aging sucks. End the guesswork. There is hope.
USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Tracy Cram-Perkins, a dementia caregiving survivor teaching how to balance care with peace of mind. #1 resource for dementia caregivers. It's the book Dementia Home Care: How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Over 17,000 copies sold of this must-have guide. And now a testimonial from Tracy Smith.
If I was to describe this book to someone who is going through a similar situation, I would underscore how important it is to have some sort of a tool or a guidebook to help you through certain stages. And there's so many, it's such an unknown topic to the average person. And to have this as a reference is essential. It's going to help you get through it personally, as well as help your loved one manage.
To learn more, go to TracyCramPerkins.com. Tracy Cram-Perkins is an award-winning author. She's also the host of Dementia Home Care television show. Watch it here on USA Global TV and Radio.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative Direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.